All right. So, ahla wa sahla, welcome everybody. Before I start the session, I want to go on into some minor logistics. السيشن راح تكون بالإنجليزي، بس إذا أي حدا بده الترجمة بالعربي فيه يروح على لينك راح تكون موجودة على الشات, which will provide الترجمة basically. For the rest of us in English, welcome. Thank you, Mary, Nassim, and Samar for joining me today on this impact investing in Palestine and the MENA region. It's high time we speak about impact investing for Palestine. I want to start really by saying that I'm very happy and thankful for all my partners on this panel. I want to thank the team on the ground and in general all over the team of Build Palestine. I want to thank the audience. And I also want to welcome the three of you who will not only walk us today into what are the challenges and the opportunities for impact investing in Palestine, but will help us work together and think more about how can we lead as social innovators, as policymakers, as donor community, as the diaspora, and as investors to really take Palestine into how do we really imagine it? How do we turn this imagination for us about Palestine into a livable reality? Where we could take it from there. So to start, allow me to start by introducing Nassim as the minority gender person with us today. So Nassim is a friend and a great colleague. He's been working in impact investing and international economic development for 3 decades. He's been in Australia, in Africa, and in the Middle East. Currently, Nassim is the executive director for Sharakat for SMEs, which is a subsidiary of the Palestine Investment Fund. And Nassim will help us today to talk more about he'll give us the local insight on Palestine and the investment scene in Palestine. What are the sectors, what are the policies, and what are the needs? Then we'll go to you, Mary. And if you don't mind raising your hand just for people to, okay, and actually we have the names there, sorry. So Mary is also another colleague and friend who is a founder of the 17 Ventures. That's a MENA-based investment and advisory firm focused on advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Mary is also the general partner at the CIAF Jordan Growth Fund and the Impact Fund, and a managing director for the CIAF Globally Displaced Peoples Fund. Mary will help us today zoom more into the MENA region, the impact investing scene, and the access to resources for Palestine as well. And then we will zoom more globally with Samar into the global perspective and the global opportunities for Palestine. Samar is actually, she's also a great colleague. She's dedicated her career focusing on the intersection of national security and economic development. She's worked with both President Barack Obama and the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. In 2013, Samar returned to the private sector by co-founding Lodestone Advisory Group, a multinational consulting firm specializing in internationalization, investment advisory, and strategy. And she's recently also joined the board of Windrock International. So I'll start with you, Nassim, where we could start more on the on Palestine, and then we zoom back in. And as we zoom back out, I would like to ask Mary and Samar to speak a little bit more about their transitions, as well as Nassim as well, because when I was choosing this panel, I really people who are not only dedicated to impact investing, but people who've been in the legal platform, in the development sector, in the philanthropy and other sectors, whereby you could bring in the two perspectives of that into investment as well, which is very unique to Palestine specifically. So Nassim, to start with you, from your experience, what are the sectors today in Palestine that are still lucrative for investors, where there's a potential for growth, there's a potential for job creation, and how do you see that those sectors could be relevant not only to investors, but also to the Palestinian diaspora, and what role the diaspora and the donor community basically could play?
Yes, I see my journey similar to the transition between the previous session and this session, because the previous session was talking about philanthropy, and that's where I spent most of my career life, doing relief and development across the world and in Palestine. And the transition has been amazing, because I realized that while aid And philanthropy is great to save lives, like when I was in Rwanda after the genocide, and in the Congo when it, came from being Zaire, and in Ethiopia and other places, where aid can save life, but actually it's impact investment that can provide sustainable development and sustainable income into people's life and provide dignified livelihood. And that's why I made the transition from aid into impact investing. I think if you can actually achieve the double bottom line, it's amazing. The feeling is amazing. You can get the return, the financial return, and also you can impact lives. You can create jobs, and also you can enjoy it. You can see the results, and you don't have even to bring evaluators at the end of the program to see whether the impact is, has taken place or not. And in this sense, when I was in DFID, just before coming here, working for the British government, one statistics that we always quoted, that Palestinians were the highest per capita aided population in the world. And that was before Syria hit. And I always wondered, what did we do with that? I mean, how many jobs did we create? How many livelihoods did we provide? Yes, we did build roads, we built nice ministries, we built schools, and we built hospitals. But I cannot really quantify how many jobs did we create. We created more civil servant jobs, government jobs that are still receiving salaries, but we didn't really create productive jobs. And moving into investment, I saw that there are several sectors that we can actually invest in. And we will speak later about the role of the diaspora in that. But I found out that the biggest two assets that we have, and by the way, rule of thumb in investing, you invest in what you spend most of your money in on. And second is you invest in the assets that you have. That's the first thing you have to do. And our biggest assets are land and the human capital. And in land, I think our biggest potential is to invest in agriculture, agribusiness, and also in tourism. And when we speak about these sectors, we speak about the whole value chain of these sectors. When we speak about agriculture, we speak from R&D to marketing and everything in between, and agribusiness and livestock and everything. And here we focus mostly on import substitution. We are a consumption society in Palestine. We import more than $500 million of food items every year. This is sad, but also it is an opportunity. We can substitute in that. We made some progress in dairy production, in some other sectors, and we were able to substitute some of the Israeli products and some of the imported products. We can do more. In tourism, last year, we had over 3 million people visiting Bethlehem alone. We need to improve the tourism offer. We need to get more. Unfortunately, COVID-19 hit. We have 0 this year. But things will come back, and we can invest more in tourism. Tourism is more than Al-Aqsa Mosque and Nativity Church. It's about the tourism offer, the offer that we can give, which should include culture and food and music and art and everything else, which we're not tapping into at all. On the human capital, I think technology is being talked about forever, but it remains the number one thing that we should focus on more. The problem is that our education system is not good enough to graduate employable IT experts that could be employed immediately. Companies who are working in technology have to spend a lot of money on training. But our graduates are trainable, highly trainable, they are smart, and they remain in the job, high retention, which you don't find in any other countries. In Jordan, other places, people leave when they get better jobs in the Gulf. If you hire a person, if you train a person, you invest in a person in Gaza, most likely he will remain or she will remain there for life. You give them a decent salary and they will remain with you for life. And I think, so in conclusion, I think land and the human capital are the two main assets that we should invest in. And we can go into more details later about that.
Thank you, Nassim. Mary, I want to zoom into you and ask you more. If we situate Palestine within the overall impact investing ecosystem, what are the untapped opportunities out there? And especially if we could link it more into what Nassim just mentioned, the sectors as well. And maybe you could also tap into a blended finance, whether it is a solution that could be utilized for driving investment in Palestine.
No, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. And congratulations to Build Palestine for such an amazing event. I've been watching all day, really, Atikum al-Afia. It's been amazing. Yara, if you just allow me and Nassim and Samar, before I jump into impact investment and blended finance and all that fun stuff, I just want to, because some of the audience may know me, from a different background, I just like to give a little bit of background as to how my journey sort of has come to be. So, my background is in activism, political justice activism, and social justice activism. And I've been sort of within the Palestinian rights movement for the past 20 years. I was in Birzeit in 1998 with the work camps, in the anti-normalization committee here, and one of the founders of BDS Jordan, and we were leading the movement against the gas deal. And then I became a barrister with the English bar to become, a barrister so that people will listen to me when I talk about Palestinian rights, and then founded the Palestine Legal Aid Fund, and we were funding and facilitating war crimes cases and other cases in support of Palestinian rights. And at the same time, I got involved with business and saw, the power of capital, and started to think about, what if we started using capital as a force for good, right? And then I got involved with the whole impact investment scene and started attending all these big conferences like the GIN and PSG, and these are big impact investment conferences. And I noticed that, these are supposed to be investors and people who are dedicated to driving private capital to where it's needed the most, to justice causes, etc. But Palestine and Jordan, for that matter, was simply not on the map. It was crazy. Like the GIN conference, for example, in Amsterdam, I was invited there to speak about refugee lands investments. And there was one other Palestinian, and you couldn't even choose MENA as a geography that you're interested in. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, impact investors should be looking at Palestine. We should be looking at the investment opportunities there. For example, SDG 16, peace and justice, it's a huge investment theme. And there are investors out there that are looking for investment vehicles, funds, direct investments within that theme. We should be the primary, investment destination for people who are looking at that. Gender, the Sustainable Development Goals, that's a huge thing now. I mean, my whole new company that I founded a couple of years ago is based on UN Sustainable Development Goals. How can you be wanting to invest in SDG land and not consider Palestine as a recipient of some of that investment? No, we are not only investable, but we are, we can provide you with the impact pieces that you're looking for. You do have to keep in mind that impact investors, range from people who really want impact first. They're looking for sort of that return on gender, for example, or youth, or education, or people with disabilities, or environment, or energy, or agri, or whatever. But then you have other investors that are looking for a market return. So that's where, blended finance comes in. And I think it's amazing that the other panelists have set this up so well. So in blended finance, you're looking at blending sort of concessional or philanthropic or grant money or subset or different types of money with private money, usually to de-risk that opportunity. So for one of the funds that I'm currently managing, we have 20% of that money of the fund, which is concessional, which will de-risk or hopefully raise the return for investments, for investors. So that's another thing that we really need to be thinking about. Palestine may not be an attractive opportunity for many investors from the return perspective. I think from the impact perspective, we should be making the case. But from the return perspective, we have to be looking at innovative finance tools to up that return, or at least de-risk the investment.
Great, and that takes us to you, Samar, and I see you nodding in agreement with Mary. Yep. You visited Palestine in 2014, and you were ready to launch a fund, and then the war on Gaza started, and everything collapsed. However, from that visit, when you and I chatted about it, you said that I'm still interested in working in Palestine, even from a lens of an impact investor. I still see a potential for Palestine, and we'll talk more about your role coming forward later. But I want to hear more from you about that sense of coming into Palestine with the eyes of, I want to invest, then a war started. But still, despite the war, you've learned a lot that you could pass on today to social innovators that could learn from it and now reapproach impact investors or position themselves in a place where it's attractive to impact investors.
Yes, thank you, Yara, and so much to say. And also, I just want to echo what my colleagues have already said about congratulations on this incredible summit and platform. This is very important. It's so important for so many different reasons because, as you mentioned before we started, that there are people calling in from watching from over 52 countries around the world. That is really significant. And so I don't think I'm the only one who's still interested in investing in Palestine. I think there's a lot of, I'm in very good company here. And I think that's what excites me. And as you said, am I still interested? Let me put it this way. I'm interested more than ever before. And I am committed to Palestine and I am committed to the Palestinian people, and I am not alone. And I think we really have to keep that in mind. And we have to believe it because it's true. And I would say there are short-term goals, there are medium-term goals, and there are long-term goals. And if every time there's a challenge, we just sort of say, well, that didn't work, we're not going to, oh, well, we're really doing a disservice to the potential of the people, as Nassim was saying, about the people on the ground, the human resources that are there, and also with regards to the utilization of the land. That's so important to appreciate and realize, and not only for the Palestinian people, but the opportunities for the world that come from that place. I cannot stress that enough. And I also just want to say, because you mentioned in my background that I work at the intersection of national security and economic development. And there's I really work at the intersection of national security, human rights, and economic development. And I oftentimes say, and I was trained initially as a human rights lawyer, and I should say that I don't believe that you can actually realize national security without human rights. And that's an important component to that, which oftentimes gets overlooked. And I would also just say in my time working on the Syrian conflict, in part when I was in the government and then afterwards as a third-party mediator, I saw more than ever how important that intersection is, and that oftentimes we think about economic development post a peace deal, post a sustainable peace arrangement, whereas I think the two go in parallel. And that's why it's really important for this discussion, this panel. So you mentioned about 2014, and I spent some time looking into setting up a fund, and I spent time on the ground and also analyzing the ecosystem. And what I would say is this: I see the ecosystem right now is actually not working together. It's being broken up. And people are operating in silos, and also when people are approaching investors, they're not coming at it in my opinion, in a 360-degree way. And so what I believe that people who are seeking investment, what we really, because of the unique situation there, what would be incredibly important is to have a very diverse team that includes the following skill sets. The person who is the ideas person, the person who's come up with the idea, the founder, along with somebody who is a very shrewd negotiator, along with somebody who's a lawyer who understands the legal landscape very well. And fourth is somebody who has a fundraising background, who's raised funds before, preferably, has access to capital. And five is somebody who's actually and this probably might throw people off the most what I'm about to say, but I think it's incredibly important here, and that is somebody who is a communications expert. Somebody who's not only has a marketing background, but knows how to package and the offering and when you're approaching both investors, because one of the things that's also going to come up is how you're going to manage risks. And you have to be ready for that answer, and you have to have a good answer. But anybody who's ready to invest, given the current climate, understands that they are going to be making a relatively high-risk investment.
And I want to talk more about that, actually, especially the communications person, when we tap more into the diaspora question, which I'll be asking the three of you. But in order to tap into the diaspora question, I'd like to go back to Nassim with a question about the overall ecosystem in Palestine. We all understand the overall challenges, external challenges, I would say, with Palestine, in addition to the investors' lens of this is a small market, this is not necessarily lucrative, and so on. But then there's the question of what if all of those externalities remain? What are the needs that we as Palestinians, how innovative, how radical should our approaches become, be it the PA or be it the people, in order to overcome those challenges, to build the necessary ground, and what are the right policies that should be in place to incentivize people to take care of the land and to build the skills that we will need regardless. If not today, we need to keep those happening for the future. So Nassim, if you could tell us more about that.
When we work internally on our internal issues, we will be even better equipped to deal with the externalities and even to face these externalities and to resist them. And I think to remain in Palestine and to be able to wake up in the morning and feel that you can do something, you have no choice but to look internally and say, what can I do today? What can I do as a government? What can I do as an investment fund? What can I do as an individual to make things a little bit better? And I think that's what keeps most of us here. And in this sense, I look at three things normally, things that are within our capacity. There are many more, but just three for now. One is aid policy. I think aid policy needs to be overhauled totally. We need to be smart about what we ask for. I used to go with the Minister of Development, the UK Minister of Development. We used to go and visit a minister, a Palestinian minister. And in very rare occasions, the British minister would ask, how can we help? Very rarely they would drop this. What can we do? They would get so impressed, so excited. And
that's when we should jump on it.
It was always shocking what we asked for. I remember one asked for computers for the ministry. One asked for, just the normal thing. Nobody asked things like, talk to your company in the UK and let them come and invest here, or open a market for us. None of these, and I always think this always used to be a missed opportunity. I think we need to overhaul whatever is left from the aid system and whatever is left from aid money. Aid money should be used in a blended way, just like Mary said, to mitigate the risk of economic development and investment in Palestine. That's the number one. And I think we've succeeded, and some donors are responding to that. In my current work, we went to the EU, for instance, and we said we want to invest in agriculture and agribusiness, but this is an inherently risky sector. And to be able to crowd in other investors with all the risks that exist in the sector and the situation, nobody will come. And we convinced them to come and put money with us as junior equity. And they will put money, and we will soon launch an agriculture/agribusiness fund. I think if you don't ask for it, they will go and donors will do whatever is more comfortable for them. And they will just tick the box and put it in the traditional sector. So that's the number one. Number two is our fiscal policies. Regardless of the occupation and the pressures and the restrictions on movement and access and everything, regardless of the Paris Protocol, which is a disaster, there are fiscal policies within the Palestinian Authority that they can work with. And I think the number one is, they're twofold. One is protective policies, and the other is incentive policies. And the two go hand in hand. If we say we would like to protect the Jordan Valley, for instance, right, from expropriation, Jordan Valley, then we need to focus on agriculture. Currently, nobody pays taxes. It's the normal people who pay taxes, but there aren't new people who pay taxes because there are very few new companies and new ventures coming up. But if we say, hey, anyone who would open a new business in the Jordan Valley or cultivate land or develop an agribusiness in this area, they will get a 5-year bracket from taxes. Just something simple like that.
Yep.
First, you will get people jumping on the opportunity. And second, after 5 years, those would be tax paying. people.
Taxpayers. Yeah.
Taxpayers, yeah. So in a way, we're looking short term. The main utilization of the tax regime right now is to get as much money as possible to pay the salaries, because that's our only source. That's our main source right now of salaries. But actually, taxes should be used to incentivize, to direct the economy towards specific objectives. And I just gave one example, but there are many, many examples. So if we want to substitute and import, if we take one product every year and focus on that, actually within 10 years, we can achieve so much. And we talk about red meat, yellow cheese, anything. You can start with it and we can start substituting one by one using tax incentives and other policies. The last thing, also related always to the two pillars, land and human capital, is the education system and the education policies. This has to be overhauled. We failed. I think we failed on education. And as a Palestinian, I can say, I think the UK, when they went out of the World War II, the first thing they focused at, when they were still like receiving aid from the whole world, they focused on education. And that's why the teacher in the elementary teacher in the UK gets more paid than probably a minister. We have failed to actually create an education system that is conducive to the human development in general. We do very well when we study abroad. We do okay in some subjects when we study in Palestine. And this is within our hands. It's also related to what we ask for from the donors. Technology-based education is the way to go. And this starts from grade 1. One of the very, and I spoke to Mary about that a while ago. One of the projects that we're proud of in my company is that we established the first school in Jenin that teaches coding as a third language from grade 1 with robotics. It's been an amazing experience just to see children wanting to go to school and creating robots from grade 1 to grade 12. Now it's happening more and more, but that's what we need to do. We need to radically change the education system so as to have, better human capital. But these are the
and those are radical times.
Sorry,
Nassim, to interrupt you. I'm saying those are radical times, and the problem is we've also haven't been understanding the market, the increase in unemployment, the need to change the educational system to be fit for this market and for the opportunities that could come. If we're asking people to stay in the land, then we should provide them with the needs and skill them to be able to stay in the land, but also find the right opportunities for them. And I think the coding school is going to be a great example for that I hope would be replicated in other cities as well. Samar and Mary, I want to move on to both of you. Based on the overall discussion, but also your own experiences and listening more from Nassim on what the situation is in Palestine, but also what are the opportunities and the work we personally need to do. Can you tell us more about and I'll start with you, Mary, about the Jordan Fund and the Global Refugee Fund, and what's their vision for investing in Palestine? How could, if we want to still say there are impact investors looking into Palestine, how can you tell us more about how those investments are working?
No, I'd love to. Thank you. And thank you, Nassim, for setting that context. I just want to say, before I get into the two funds that I'm involved with, I just think that given the dysfunctional, situation, apartheid, occupation, COVID-19, everything, what has actually evolved within the Palestinian ecosystem is very remarkable. I'm not there at the moment, I'm not allowed in, but it's really, we need to take our hats off to people there who are really giving their heart and souls to giving hope to the future generations. I was talking to Amber yesterday from Ibtikad. Ibtikad is launching their second fund. Techstars is coming. Y Combinator is coming. Like, people are excited, and obviously Hashim Mashawar from Bank of Palestine was talking about their new hub, the innovation hub. So there is a lot happening. I think when you're on the ground in occupied Palestine, it's hard to see, how much you've actually accomplished. So just, hats off to everyone, over there. And I've run a business in Palestine 10 years ago in occupied Jerusalem. which some of you may know about. And it was difficult then. And I know now, talking to friends in Jerusalem, like other young global leaders, it's so much worse now. Like, it's so much more difficult. So anyway, what was your question about the funds that, I'm running? So there was a question here that I saw in this chat box. What do impact investors need, to come into a place like Palestine? So one thing they need is really good governance, good structures, transparency, all that kind of stuff. So because of that, what I chose to do for the Jordan Fund is partner with an impact fund manager who's globally recognized and has made 400 investments and has 30 years of experience in emerging markets. And because they've done it 400 times before, I thought, listen, with their track record, they're going to help me make this fund everything that it can be. And we're raising $100 million for Jordan Palestine. So like, it's a big fund, let's say. And we are excited about investing in Palestine. I think there are opportunities there. And when we were designing the fund, because we used a design thinking approach, we met with investors who said, look, Palestine should be part of your geographical mandate. And we said, absolutely, yes. So far, it's 20% of the fund. We look to invest in Palestine. We're sector agnostic. We're excited about all the sectors that Nassim just mentioned. I think agri is very important for multiple reasons. There is a very strong impact thesis that underpins the Jordan Growth and Impact Fund, which is job creation for women and youth and people with disabilities in particular. So it has an inclusion focus. The other fund, which I can talk about quickly and then love to hear from Samar, is called the SEEF Globally Displaced Peoples Fund. And this is a SEEF fund, so it's directly under SEEF as an impact fund manager. And this is super exciting for me because it has a refugee lens. And refugees for me have been sort of a driver for the past decades. And this is the first time we're looking to actually invest in companies that are founded by refugees, managed by refugees, service refugees, or host communities. So it's about changing that narrative of refugees from being a burden to, a blessing. And it was, I've worked with a lot of social enterprises in the camps here that have shown me that you can go beyond philanthropy. Philanthropy is important. We've already discussed this, but there's a place for it. And there's a place for investment, and there's a place, for both. So this, again, it's a big fund. We're raising $100 million for this Displaced Peoples Fund. And I'm in charge of operations in the Levant. So we're looking at pipeline in Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Turkey. We have plenty of refugees in our region, unfortunately. And that's not to say that we don't have to deal with the political issues. I always say, as a human rights lawyer, Palestinians have the right to return, restitution to compensation. But until return is realized, they have to live in dignity. So this we're trying to do this fund.
Thank you, Samar. So thank you, Mary. And I want to confirm just one thing, because lately in the, since I'm also working always on the economic inclusivity of refugees, I've seen a lot in that platform whereby in today's market, we talk about refugees by mainly focusing on Syrian refugees, and I'm not trying to disregard them, but today every refugee is an important refugee. Palestinian refugees have been refugees for years. The Syrian refugees are struggling the same way, and we have the Yemenis and the Libyans and the Iraqis and so on. So I just want to confirm that with this fund, you are looking at every refugee, regardless of their national or background.
We are. We're even looking at Latin America, we're looking at Colombia, we're looking at other states. And even in Jordan, we have so many refugee populations here. Like every 1 in 3 persons in Jordan is a refugee. And each group of refugees have different rights to work. So it's very contextual, like context specific. And even within the Palestinian refugees in Jordan, for example, refugees from 1967, Gaza don't have the right to work other than in the camp. So, it's a complicated situation, but we're looking to invest with a refugee lens that's very inclusive.
Okay, great. Thank you. Samar, I'll move on to you. Tell us, how do you see the future of impact investing in Palestine? And I know you could also tell us more about opportunities for new funds that could be coming to Palestine.
Well, I think first what I would do is focus on what are the opportunities for impact investments, and particularly in the global space. I say it too because I think sometimes when we're talking about investments in Palestine, when you're trying to appeal to a global investor, it can become, if you treat it too much as if it's so specialized, then you can you can actually take yourself out of the running and out of consideration, because
that's the communication expertise you were talking about.
That's right. And I think there are a couple of examples and best practices which I'm going to share in just a moment. And so I think like one of the things we need to do, quite frankly, is disrupt the echo chamber that we're in. Everybody's in an echo chamber right now. And if you haven't seen the movie Social Dilemma, I highly recommend you watching it. And whether it's our fault or not, we can blame it on technology, but there are algorithms at work. And so human beings automatically do tend to operate in echo chambers. And this is making the situation even more severe. So we really have to disrupt our echo chambers that we're speaking in and be thinking about how do we connect with somebody who's not necessarily themselves Palestinian. Yes, we need to be talking to Palestinians in the diaspora, of course, but we also need to be appealing to people. And I liked the panel that was before this too, that talked about the donor culture, and that's something that I also really felt the past few times actually, this past decade that I was spending time in Palestine, was the manifestation of the donor culture and how it was actually affecting people's imaginations and their critical thinking abilities and the metrics of which they measured success. Because the people who were placing what success looked like from their standpoint, that what they needed to come back to their foundations or to DFID or to USAID and determine was success, is not necessarily what the private sector considers to be success and what an impact investor would consider to be success. And so we need to, I think, pick a path and decide if you're going to trying to appeal to an investor who is interested in a return on their investment. I mean, kind of going back to basics here, then the metrics that a donor considers to be successful and then an investor considers to be successful are likely to be different. And so we have to take that into consideration with regards to the model that we're setting up here. And on the best practices and comparison piece, I grew up in a rural southern county in Tennessee called Humphreys County. I watched it deteriorate from being one of the wealthiest counties in Tennessee to being one of the poorest counties in Tennessee. Rural America is suffering. It is still in a great recession, not just the county that I grew up in Tennessee, but rural America, period. And this is when you mentioned that I'm on the board of Winrock International. What's interesting about Winrock is that we do investments globally. We have operations in over 55 countries, and also locally and domestically in the United States, and specifically in agribusiness. And so some of the areas that we're focusing on are what we're talking about here. And in Nashville, Tennessee, one of the things in Davidson County, where I'm calling in from right now, and where I'm participating in from right now, one of the things that helped boost the Nashville economy was tourism. And there's a playbook from the past 10 years that we can learn from here. We don't have to only look at the Middle East and, or even look at bordering countries for examples. There's an entire world of examples. I just wanted to go back to something that Nassim mentioned, the question before last, and that is measuring success in terms of how many jobs are created. So after I worked in the White House, I also worked for Governor Haslam, and I was the Assistant Commissioner for International Development, and I helped put together our foreign direct investment strategic plan for 5 years. And my success and basically the success of my job was measured on how many jobs am I helping create? How many jobs am I helping create through foreign direct investment? Not how many great ideas did I come up with? What did the execution of my strategy look like? And on that note, I should say that 45% of jobs in Tennessee alone, which is a state of 6 million people, 45% of the jobs in Tennessee are dependent on the global economy, on foreign direct investment in the United States of America. Okay, so here, what does that mean for us? We need to focus on the basics. We need to go back to basics. We need to say, how many jobs are we creating? Okay, how are we supporting the jobs that we are creating so that they're not here for 6 months and then they're gone 1 year later? So how do we create these sustainable jobs? How do we look at best practices, not only in rural America, but rural all over the world, quite frankly, and particularly in agribusiness? And how do we also, and I just want to say this, and I'll just end on this note here, and that is, do you know what the top 4 areas of interest are to American voters in this election today, in the election in 2020, this election that's coming up in 5 weeks, rather 4 weeks? 4 things. I want to mention them because they've already been mentioned on this call as relevant to Palestine. 1, jobs. 2, education. 3, healthcare. 4, trade workforce development. So why is that relevant? We need to connect with people who are focused on the same issues and build that empathy and that understanding, and not be an outlier, but rather connect in. Connect into the existing framework of how people have designed what they consider to be success around impact investing.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well,
it's not as tough as it seems, I promise.
I hope so. I hope so, but I also believe it's our only option, so we have to do the work. So let's put it this way. I want to move to a question that's been asked a lot on the chat, but also it's been on my list, and I think it's relevant to all of my 3 speakers. So if we could tap into it, each of you. Nassim, again, I'll start with you. And we've heard it today, even with Hashim as a keynote speaker, but we've heard it in other panels of what's the role of the Palestinian diaspora today. There's an issue of an older generation of Palestinians who've been looking at Palestine from the donation perspective and the philanthropy and charity perspective. And today there's a second and almost a third generation Palestinians abroad as diaspora who are not necessarily as connected to Palestine as the previous generations were. And even if they are, many of who are still connected continue to follow on their parents' path. We need to change that and tap more into how do we turn our diaspora into real investors. And is the problem ours? Is this something internally we haven't worked on? Or is this a lack of communication between the inside and the outside? Or is this just a lack of interest from the lens of the diaspora, whereby it's not an investment ready market? So Nassim, I'll start with you and would love to hear your perspective.
Sure. In Arabic, we say, "Eid wahde ma btzaqif," right? One hand cannot clap, we need the other. And in this sense, if we look at countries around the world, like Ireland, like India, even our neighbor, we see that they couldn't have made it without the diaspora. The diaspora played a critical role in the development of those countries. And we cannot do it alone. We cannot do it. Our strength is divided. A lot of our strength is outside of Palestine, not inside of Palestine. But there is a problem. There is a mistrust. There is miscommunication. There is misconception, and you can put lots of things next to miss. And I think we need to spend time, invest more time and effort to understand the diaspora. And the diaspora is not just one. My auntie left Palestine in 1920. They ended up in Bolivia and then in Chile. And you know, the largest diaspora in Southern America, in Latin America, is from Bethlehem area. 3 presidents in El Salvador from Bethlehem. My cousin owns like one of the largest tourist area in Chile. How do we get those to be interested here? We need to spend time to understand them, what motivates them, how we can rebuild trust. I think the story of Bank of Palestine is interesting, but we need to capitalize on it. They spent a lot of time gaining their trust first. They went to them, unlike how our politicians and others went to them begging for money and for aid. They went and said, we can actually help you. We want to sponsor the Palestino team. And that made a big difference. That allowed Palestinians from there to actually deposit some money in Bank of Palestine, allowed some people to come and invest in the stock market in Palestine. We should build on that. I don't think it will come automatic, because people who left Palestine left it for a reason. And now they developed perceptions about Palestine of corruption, of all kinds of stuff. And we need to rebuild those bridges with them. We need to understand the diaspora in Chile. We need to understand diaspora in North America, in Australia, and everywhere. And that's what we should focus on. Once we know, and those are like our target audience, once we know what incentivizes them, where are the mistrusts, and we start, demystifying one by one then we can actually reach some bridges and build some bridges with them. Traditionally, we went to them asking for money, but I don't know of anyone who went to them with a good business plan for investment. I don't think so. And when you go to them, even with a bit, they think they have to take a huge risk. We never went to them to say, hey, I am risking my money. I will risk my money. And here is some money from the donors. And what we're asking you, maybe just open markets, maybe just give us some know-how. They would love to do that. I spoke to them and they said, we are waiting. We're waiting for someone to come and present something that we can give back to Palestine. But they need someone who they can trust. And I think trust is the big thing here. They don't trust the Palestinian Authority, unfortunately. They think there is corruption. There is corruption, just like in any other country. But it's not a big impediment to doing business here. We can do business. And actually, talking to some investors in Chile, they are taking their money now to Bolivia and to the neighboring countries because they're just so rich and they don't know what to do with their money. And some of them are in tourism, some of them are in agriculture. And hey, we have that. We have that. We could bring them here. I just want to finish with one thing. We speak about the right of return. And we always say about the right of return for everyone over, all the diaspora. And we always think about it as a physical right of return. Yes, we hope and we pray that it will become a physical, actual right of return. But there are lots of ways we can return. And one way we can return, being in the diaspora, being refugees, is to actually come back and do something economic to Palestine. That's one way. You come in and invest. Even with a foreign passport, you are allowed to come in and invest. Even in Area C, come and invest as a foreign investor. This way, this needs commitment, but the returns are high risk, high returns, and there is also the impact. I think I am part of a diaspora group in South America, and we chat on WhatsApp all the time. And it's like a fantasy for them. It's a romantic thing about Palestine. It's never. And when we said we want to do something, they started speaking about donating for an ambulance. It's hard to penetrate that. We need to invest more time to understand them. We need to go visit them, and we need their visits to us to be more structured in terms of what we show them, so they don't just come and pray in Al-Aqsa and meet the family and we do all this circus to them and send them back. We need to get them to our successful businesses, to get them to the companies that survived, the companies that are resilient. Let them see that they can actually make money here. They can make money, and let them see the impact they could do and make in Palestine. I think it's a long way. Many donors tried to work on the diaspora. It didn't work out. We didn't do our job, and the diaspora also are losing interest. So that's why we need
let's hope we build on that trust.
Yeah,
trust is a big challenge that's ahead of us, but let's hope we can do that. And Mary, I'll move on to you.
Sorry, just to say, small steps go a long way. If the more they hear about successful stories between the diaspora and the Palestinians here, the more people will get encouraged. So we need to go to them with stories, with successful stories.
Yeah, back to communication. Mary, please.
Sure, and I'll be quick because I can see the notifications that we need to end. I love how we keep talking about South America. I have so much family in Colombia, by the way. So it's like we're all connected over there. Listen, I think the diaspora issue is a tough nut to crack. Like, I didn't crack it when I was raising funds in 2008, 2009 for the Palestine Legal Aid Fund. In retrospect, I think that maybe it was a hard sell to ask people to put funds into prosecuting Zippy Livni. Like, maybe someone won't want to do that. Fine. I think, we've been relatively successful on the BDS front in Sharakat, where I've served on the board, for almost a decade. We had good outreach to the diaspora. When it comes to investments, at the end of the day, we're asking to move away from charity, right? I mean, this is what we're saying. We want this to be an investment proposition. So that means that, right, you have the impact thesis, and that has to be very clearly articulated. But the investment thesis equally has to be well thought out. The fund has to be, if we're talking about funds, governance is key, registration is key. You have to model the fund out. What are the returns? What is your hurdle rate? If you have to offer a proper vehicle to investors. If we're talking about startups, again, it can't be a startup that can only operate in Ramallah. This has to be a startup that can expand regionally, if not globally, if we want to attract, an investor who has returns on their mind. So it's just a totally different way of presenting the proposition, investment-wise and impact-wise.
Great point. Samar.
Yes, and I would just what my colleagues already said, I think is very important, including that the diaspora, many members of the diaspora will romanticize this, and so I think we have to move from the heart being in the right place to then helping build trust and wrap the mind around the investment offerings too, and the opportunities that are there, along with the diversification too of the opportunities, including who they're investing with, so that somebody doesn't feel like they're carrying all the burden. And so I would kind of really think about that. And I know we need to wrap up, and I would just go back to a point that I already made, which is how you approach the diaspora. You have legal considerations here too that you need to be thinking about. We talked about governance already. We talked about how are you going to manage corruption. We talked about how are you going to get the different things that you need to get, etc., through the legal system. So you really need to have your answers ready. You can predict what those questions are going to be, and with the right team, you can prepare the answers so that you can secure the investment that you need from the short term and the long term, and be thinking about how you build on that over time.
Thank you all. Before I ask you the last question, I want to say that I've been seeing questions on the chat box. One of which is, how do we tap into Area C? It's a risky one. We don't have permits, etc. I want to say that with that, Nassim, that was a big part of what Nassim was mentioning, of sharing the risk, be it with the donor community or with the investors that are coming in. It's still risky, but it's the only way we should do it. I mean, we either make use of the land or we don't. Some investors have already taken that baby steps towards it and are using it into smaller schemes. I think that's still important, and it's important to keep on happening. Another thing with the diaspora, and I want to reiterate what has been said and sum it up with what you said specifically, Samar, is communication. And I think it's really important. We've lost the communication internally within ourselves and externally with everybody else. So I think it's very important. Before I wrap up, we like to close sessions by asking everyone, how do you imagine Palestine? So if I want to start with you, Mary, for a change, can you use "I imagine Palestine" in a sentence and tell us what do you think?
Well, I imagine Palestine to be free and hosting of citizens that abide by our rules, and also one that can welcome all the refugees that have been in limbo back to their original homes.
Thank you. Samar?
I imagine a Palestine, of course, where people are free and able to realize their full human potential, both on an individual level and a communal level, and that goes not only on the ground but also globally. I think that's very important, and one that's corrupt free, and that's focused around values that center us.
Great, Nassim.
Yeah, sorry I spoke a lot about diaspora because I'm very passionate about it. I imagine a place where all Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, Jerusalem, historic Palestine, and in the diaspora, where they would all be interconnected and working together to build an independent country that is able to provide dignified living and a decent livelihood to all its citizens.
And I imagine a Palestine that's inclusive of its youth, its women, its people in Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, historical Palestine, the diaspora, and wherever we are. And before I wrap up, I want to thank my panelists. I want to also note that this is our last session for the day, our last panel. We'll see you all tomorrow. Stay with us to watch the great Sunbox video. And also, for those of you who would like to visit our networking sessions and our expo sessions, they're also still available for people to attend and watch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And it was lovely having you all.
Thank you.
Yara.
Thank you, Yara.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. Bye.